Samantha Hayes was born on September 18, 1969, in the bustling city of Chicago, to Mary and Patrick Hayes. The Hayes family was loving but far from affluent. Sam was their firstborn, followed by Andrew, her protective older brother, and Grace, her bright-eyed younger sister, who was 6 years younger. Growing up, Sam was always the responsible one, often helping her parents with household chores and babysitting her younger siblings. Her parents, devout Catholics, instilled a sense of discipline and empathy in their children. Though they didn't have much in terms of material wealth, their home was rich in love and faith. When Sam was just a year old, the family moved to the small town of Summerfield, Florida, after Patrick received a job offer there. Summerfield was the quintessential small town, with friendly neighbors and a tight-knit community. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and doors were left unlocked at night. Sam and her siblings quickly adapted, and though she missed the city's buzz at times, she soon found peace in the quiet surroundings of Summerfield. As a child, Sam thrived in Summerfield. She was active in school, excelling in her studies and sports. She joined the school's swimming team, where her natural athleticism shone, and also took part in gymnastics. Her summers were spent at Summerfield Beach, where she and her friends spent hours in the sun, enjoying the warm ocean breeze. It was the kind of place where you could wander for hours without a care in the world. Sam's bond with her younger sister, Grace, grew as they grew older. Grace idolized Sam and always wanted to be just like her. Whether it was joining the same extracurricular activities or dressing in the same style, Grace followed Sam's every move. Sam, always protective, did her best to guide and support Grace through the ups and downs of life. They were inseparable until the day Sam was taken from her. By the time Sam entered high school, she had already established herself as a role model and community pillar. It was during her sophomore year that she discovered the Summerfield Babysitting program, a unique initiative that paired trained high school students with families in need of childcare. This was a perfect opportunity for Sam to earn extra money while helping others. She had always enjoyed taking care of kids, particularly her younger sister, and quickly signed up. Sam was a natural caregiver. She was reliable, patient, and had a special way with children. Before long, the local families started requesting her specifically. Sam loved children, and in a town as small as Summerfield, everyone knew everyone. Sam's babysitting business flourished, and she quickly became one of the most trusted and sought-after sitters in the town. On top of babysitting, Sam continued to excel in swimming, training for regional and state championships, and dreaming of securing a college scholarship. It was the summer of 1984 when Sam's life was supposed to change. She had been planning a trip to New York to visit her best friend, Michelle, who had recently moved there. Sam had been saving up money from her babysitting jobs to fund the trip, and she was excited to reunite with Michelle and explore the city. But that Friday evening, she received a call from the Millers, a family she had sat with many times before. They asked if she could watch their two girls, Lucy and Emma, as they had a dinner event to attend. Sam initially wanted to decline, as she had made plans with friends, but she realized the extra money would help her afford the trip to New York. Reluctantly, she agreed. Sam's mother, Mary, drove her to the Miller household, a cozy, two-story home on the outskirts of Summerfield, just a short walk from the beach. As usual, Mr. and Mrs. Miller reminded Sam to lock all the doors and keep the girls secure while they were away. Sam settled in with the girls, having a pleasant evening. They played board games, watched cartoons, and enjoyed a simple dinner. By 9:30 p.m., she tucked the girls into bed and gave them both a goodnight kiss. Then, she sat down in the living room, made a quick call to Michelle to discuss their upcoming plans, and after a brief conversation, called Jane, a friend of hers who was also babysitting that night. They exchanged stories about how their evenings were going. Sam mentioned that she was about to head to the kitchen for a snack and promised to call Jane back shortly. But that call never came. Around midnight, the Millers returned home, only to be greeted by a strange silence. The porch light, which they always left on, was off. Inside, the house was dark, and the TV was turned off. The front door was unlocked. Odd, as Sam was always diligent about locking up. They entered the house and began calling out for Sam, but there was no response. Mr. Miller went first to check on the girls, finding them safe and sound, asleep in their beds. He let out a sigh of relief, but something didn't sit right. He called out for Sam again, but there was no answer. His heart pounded as he slowly walked down the hallway, his eyes scanning the rooms. When he entered the kitchen, he froze. A large pool of blood covered the floor. The phone, which had been hanging on the wall, was now lying on the floor, the cord dangling. A trail of blood led from the kitchen down the hallway toward the bedrooms. Mr. Miller rushed to the girls' bedroom, where they were still asleep and unharmed. But his heart raced with fear for Sam. He immediately ran to the neighbors to call the police. When officers arrived, they began searching the house. The scene they found in the master bedroom would haunt them forever. Sam's body lay on the floor, partially undressed, her clothes scattered. She had been brutally assaulted and stabbed multiple times. The towel placed over her face only added to the horror. It was clear to the detectives that this was no ordinary attack. Evidence at the scene suggested the killer had been watching Sam for some time. There were boot prints found outside and barefoot tracks inside the house, indicating that the killer had removed his boots to avoid leaving prints. A bloodied hammer was found in the kitchen, but there was no sign of the knife that likely caused the fatal wounds. Strangely, no fingerprints were found anywhere inside the house, making the case even more unsettling. Days turned into weeks, and the investigation seemed to hit a wall. There were no suspects, and the police had few leads to follow. Meanwhile, the town of Summerfield was in shock. A town that had never known such violence was now on edge, with residents locking their doors and looking over their shoulders. The police worked tirelessly, but each lead ended in frustration. Just when it seemed like the case might go cold, a second murder shocked the town. Georgiana Harris, a 38-year-old single mother, was found dead in her home, only a few miles from where Sam had been murdered. The details of Georgiana's death mirrored Sam's. A hammer was used, and there were signs of assault, but no sign of forced entry. The police were now convinced that the same person was responsible for both murders. The breakthrough came when investigators examined Georgiana's crime scene and found a fingerprint on a book next to her bed. The print didn't belong to her or her children. It was a foreign print. The police managed to trace it back to Adam Keller, a 23-year-old man with a criminal record. Keller had been arrested a few times for petty theft and public indecency, but nothing violent, until now. Adam Keller was brought in for questioning. At first, he denied any involvement in either Sam or Georgiana's murders, but as the detectives pressed him, his story began to unravel. He eventually confessed to both murders, describing how he had stalked Sam for weeks. Adam explained how he had watched her from outside the Miller house, waiting for the right moment to strike. He admitted to entering through an unlocked window, attacking Sam in the kitchen, and then dragging her into the master bedroom to finish what he had started. Adam also revealed that he had taken a shower after the crime to clean himself and hidden his bloody clothes in the bushes outside. The confession was chilling, but it was also the evidence the police needed to solve the case. Adam Keller was charged with the murders of both Sam Hayes and Georgiana Harris. During his trial, he tried to argue that his confession had been coerced, but the evidence, his fingerprints, his DNA, and his detailed account of the crime scenes was undeniable. He was convicted and sentenced to death for both murders. Sam's younger sister, Grace, struggled with the pain of losing her sister, but she turned her grief into something productive. Grace decided to become a detective, driven by the memory of Sam and her desire for justice. She worked tirelessly, climbing the ranks within the department, determined to honor Sam's legacy. In 2023, nearly 40 years after Sam's murder, Adam Keller was executed for his crimes. Grace, now a seasoned investigator, stood at the front of the execution chamber. As she watched Adam Keller's life come to an end, she reflected on everything she had been through and everything she had learned. It was justice, but it didn't bring her sister back. Still, she knew that Sam's legacy would never die. It lived on in the work she did, in the lives she helped, and in the memory of a town forever changed by the tragedy. The execution of Adam Keller brought a sense of closure to the town of Summerfield, but for Grace Hayes, the pain of losing her sister never truly faded. In the years following Sam's murder, Grace had dedicated her life to ensuring that no other family would suffer the way hers had. Her journey to becoming a detective was fraught with challenges, but her determination never wavered. Grace's first years in law enforcement were grueling. She joined the Summerfield Police Department as a rookie officer, often working long hours and taking on the toughest cases. Her colleagues admired her tenacity, but some questioned whether her personal connection to Sam's case clouded her judgment. Grace, however, used her grief as fuel, channeling it into her work and earning a reputation as a relentless investigator. One of Grace's most significant achievements came in the early 2000s, when she spearheaded an initiative to improve safety protocols for babysitters and childcare providers. Drawing from her sister's tragic experience, Grace worked with local schools and community organizations to develop training programs that emphasize situational awareness, self-defense, and emergency preparedness. The program, named Sam's Safe Sitters, became a model for other towns and cities across the state. Grace's career was marked by numerous high-profile cases, but none hit as close to home as the investigation into a series of unsolved murders that bore eerie similarities to Sam's case. In 2015, Grace discovered a pattern of attacks on young women in neighboring towns, all of which involved a hammer and signs of stalking. Convinced that the perpetrator was someone who had studied Adam Keller's methods, Grace led a task force that eventually apprehended the suspect, a former prison guard who had been obsessed with Keller's crimes. The case was a turning point for Grace, solidifying her reputation as one of the state's top detectives. It also brought her a measure of peace, as she felt she had finally honored Sam's memory in a meaningful way. But Grace's work was far from over. In the years leading up to Keller's execution, she became an advocate for victims' rights, lobbying for stricter penalties for violent offenders and better support for families affected by crime. The day of Adam Keller's execution was a somber one for Summerfield. For many residents, it was a moment of closure, a chance to put the past behind them. But for Grace, it was a bittersweet reminder of all she had lost. As she stood in the execution chamber, her mind wandered back to the summer of 1984, to the days when Sam was still alive and the world felt full of promise. After the execution, Grace returned to Summerfield, where she was greeted by a crowd of reporters and well-wishers. She gave a brief statement, thanking the community for their support and urging them to remember Sam not as a victim, but as a vibrant young woman who had touched countless lives. Sam's legacy isn't about how she died, Grace said. It's about how she lived, with kindness, courage, and an unwavering commitment to others. In the weeks that followed, Grace took a step back from her work, spending time with her family and reflecting on her journey. She visited Sam's grave, leaving a bouquet of sunflowers, Sam's favorite, and sharing stories about her life and accomplishments. Grace knew that Sam would have been proud of the woman she had become, but she also knew that her work was far from over. In the years following Keller's execution, Grace continued to make a difference in her community. She retired from the police force in 2025, but her retirement was anything but quiet. She founded the Sam Hayes Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting victims of violent crime and advocating for criminal justice reform. The foundation quickly gained national recognition, and Grace became a sought-after speaker and advocate. Grace also found time to focus on her personal life. She reconnected with old friends, traveled the world, and even wrote a memoir about her experiences. The book, titled For Sam, A Sister's Journey for Justice, became a bestseller, inspiring readers with its message of resilience and hope. As Grace grew older, she often thought about the legacy she would leave behind. She knew that her work had made a difference, but she also knew that there was still so much to be done. Justice isn't just about punishing the guilty, she often said. It's about creating a world where everyone feels safe and valued. For Grace, that world was one worth fighting for, a world where no one would have to endure the pain she had known. And as she looked back on her life, she knew that Sam's spirit would always be with her, guiding her forward and reminding her of the power of love, courage, and resilience.